Prague, March 1939, 2 weeks after the German occupation. A man opens his front door. He is 78 years old. The people outside are from the Gestapo. They wanted to know about the paintings, not the posters. Everyone in Europe knew the posters, the women with the flower-coiled hair, the theater bills, the champagne advertisements. Those the Gestapo had no interest in. They wanted to know about the other ones, the ones he'd spent 18 years making, the ones he'd given away. It started 40 years earlier, in Paris, with a commission. Paris, 1899. The Eiffel Tower has been standing for a decade, and Parisians have stopped apologizing for it. A young painter from Moravia, who had arrived in the city 12 years earlier with no money and no French, has become the most recognizable commercial artist in Europe. His name is Mucha. In Paris, they consider him French. In the spring of that year, the Austro-Hungarian Empire made him an offer. They were building a pavilion for the 1900 Paris World's Fair representing Bosnia and Herzegovina, which Austria-Hungary had occupied since 1878. They needed an artist, someone who could make a colonial territory look like a civilization in full flower, someone whose name would draw crowds. He said yes. Before the work began, they gave him a rail pass and sent him to Bosnia to gather material. He traveled for weeks. He photographed people in village markets, attended ceremonies, sat in coffee houses where the arguments were conducted in a language that sounded like a version of his own.
He was a Czech. His own country had been under the same empire for 3 centuries. He had spent 12 years in Paris becoming French. He wrote about the journey later, that in Bosnia he had found what he'd searched for his entire life. He returned to Paris and built the pavilion. A fantastical thing, a red roof, blue walls, wedged between the more pretentious Austrian and Hungarian palaces on the Rue des Nations. 48 million people attended the exposition. The French government gave him the Legion of Honor. The Austro-Hungarian Empire awarded it its highest civilian decoration, the Order of Franz Joseph I. He accepted both. Then one night, back in his studio, he stopped. He stood in the middle of the room and looked at what surrounded him. Decorative panels commissioned for aristocratic drawing rooms, stacks of posters, letters from companies asking for chocolate box designs and cigarette wrappers, illustrations for books no one would read in 50 years. He wrote about that night, and then a single line. His nation was left to quench its thirst on ditch water. That night, he made a promise to himself. He did not leave Paris immediately. He stayed another 6 years, finishing contracts, honoring what he owed. A man who owes his entire career to a city doesn't simply walk out. But the Order of Franz Joseph I sat in its case, and the idea that had arrived in the studio that night kept growing. He left Paris in 1906. Behind him, the most imitated commercial style in Europe, a name every art school student knew, a market that would have given him anything he wanted to make. He left to make something no one had asked for. No publisher would print it. No gallery could sell it. No museum had asked for it.
The project required a patron. 20 large-scale canvases depicting the full sweep of Slavic history, from pre-Christian festivals to the 19th century. Between 1904 and 1910, he crossed the Atlantic 5 times. He found his patron in Charles Crane, the son of a Chicago plumbing manufacturer who had developed a serious, sustained interest in the political futures of peoples most of America had never heard of. Crane believed in the project.
He also believed, as he put it to people around him, that the finished paintings would find their place in one of the great Slavic capitals. In 1910, the work began. The studio was the ballroom of Zbiro Castle, west of Prague. The canvases were too large to stretch upright. The biggest ran more than 8 meters across, wider than the screen in a standard cinema. He worked on them flat on the floor, walking across them in his socks, then on scaffolding built above them, then on the floor again. He worked through the First World War. He worked while Austria-Hungary collapsed and a new country called Czechoslovakia appeared on the map of Europe. He was in his late 60s when he finished the 20th canvas. Here's something the standard account leaves out. By the time Mucha completed the Slavic Epic, Czech art had moved elsewhere. A younger generation was working in Cubism, Constructivism, the idiom of the Vienna Secession. Mucha's monumental, symbolist, 19th century inflected history paintings met a cultural moment that found them not inspiring, but embarrassing. The critics were specific. One called it reactionary kitsch, another described it as painting executed in a manner inherited from the past. To the avant-garde, looking backwards was a failure of nerve. To Mucha, it was a duty. These reviews appeared in 1928, the same year he gave the paintings to Prague. The formal gift was made on October 28, 1928, the 10th anniversary of Czechoslovakia's independence. Mucha and Crane transferred all 20 canvases to the city of Prague. The condition was not complicated. Prague would erect a public building to house them, a space designed for their scale. Some of the canvases stood 6 meters high. They did not fit in any existing museum. A building was not a luxury, it was the minimum. The Czech government accepted. There was, as one contemporary account put it, considerable enthusiasm. The building has not been built. Prague, March 1939. The Gestapo came for Alphonse Mucha in the first days of the occupation. He was among the first artists they detained. He was a Freemason, which was already enough. But there was something else. He was the man who had spent 18 years producing images that told Slavic peoples their history was worth the largest canvases he could stretch. Every face he painted, every battle, every moment of dignity, it all pointed toward an idea the new rulers needed to destroy. The interrogations went on for weeks. He was released. The damage was done. He developed pneumonia. On the 14th of July, 1939, Alphonse Mucha died in Prague. He was 78 years old. The Slavic Epic had already been moved into hiding, protected from the same men who had questioned him. After the war, the canvases were recovered. They had been damaged in storage. In 1963, they were moved to Moravský Krumlov, a small town in southern Moravia, 3 hours from Prague, where they were installed in a provincial castle and opened to visitors. They remained there for nearly 50 years. In 2011, they were brought to Prague, then sent back. A grandson filed suit in 2016. His sister filed another in 2023. In 2025, a new Alphonse Mucha museum opened in central Prague, a renovated Baroque palace designed with the involvement of the British architect Thomas Heatherwick. It celebrates his Art Nouveau world, the women with the flower-coiled hair, the champagne, the theater bills. The Slav Epic is not in it. The 20 canvases remain in Moravský Krumlov. They will stay there until at least 2031. Prague received 20 canvases, but that was never the gift. The gift was 18 years that could not be lived again. Years spent on scaffolding in a castle ballroom while the rest of Europe moved on without him. In 1921, 7 years before the paintings were even given, the Czech government made a formal public pledge to erect a building in Prague worthy of the paintings. Mucha was in the room. The pledge is now 105 years old. The Gestapo knew exactly where the paintings were. Prague still isn't sure where they belong.